Hello everyone, welcome back to Forbidden Files Asia. I'm Eric. Today, we're looking into a case that happened inside a private residential building in Hong Kong. The place had strict security, access required a card, and the hallways were filled with CCTV cameras. Residents always believed they were safe there. But in this very place, a middle-aged woman was brutally murdered. What's even stranger, police went through all the surveillance footage and entry records, yet they couldn't find a single trace of the killer. So the question is, how did the killer manage to strike without anyone noticing? And why did a handful of pills become the key to solving this so-called locked room murder? The case took place on the morning of September 30th, 2003. At about 9:39 a.m., police received an emergency call. On the line, a man's voice sounded frantic. He said, "My wife is dead." That caller was the victim's husband, Leung Wing-shing. Police officers and paramedics rushed to the scene in Kennedy Town. As soon as they stepped out of the elevator, they saw Leung pacing nervously outside the apartment, looking very anxious. The moment he saw the officers, he quickly led them straight into the bedroom. Paramedics immediately began CPR, but no matter what they tried, they couldn't revive her. In the end, she was rushed to Queen Mary Hospital for further resuscitation. Sadly, at 10:08 that morning, doctors officially pronounced Lau Siu-han dead. When the news reached the emergency ward outside, Leung looked shocked, like a husband who had just lost his wife. But what the police didn't realize at that moment was just how complicated this case would turn out to be. Lau Siu-han was 43 years old at the time of the incident. She had been married to her husband, Leung Wing-shing, for 18 years, and together they raised 2 children. Their elder daughter was 17, and their younger son was 14. By day, Lau worked as a clerk at a publishing company. She was known for being gentle, modest, and low profile. She was also a devout Buddhist, well-liked by both friends and neighbors. She wasn't wealthy, nor was she the type to show off, just an ordinary wife and a caring mother. And yet, this seemingly ordinary woman, with no enemies and no grudges, was suddenly murdered in her own home. Based on the family's statements, police reconstructed the timeline of the day of the crime. At 6:30 in the morning, the couple's 14-year-old son got up to get ready for school. He even opened his parents' bedroom door, saw his mother lying on her side asleep, and decided not to disturb her before leaving for school. Around 7:15 to 7:30, Leung Wing-shing also woke up. Before heading out for his morning run, he even joked with his wife, saying he would bring breakfast home after his jog. At about 8 a.m., he left the apartment to go running. By around 8:30, while halfway through his jog, Leung called home to ask his wife what she wanted for breakfast. But the phone rang and rang. No one picked up. He thought it was a little odd, but didn't take it too seriously and continued his run. At about 9:30, when he returned home, he found the front door wasn't shut properly, with a towel wedged into the door gap. He pushed the door open and saw that the bedroom door was wide open. From the living room, he could already see his wife lying face down on the bed, completely unresponsive, no matter how much he called her. Afterward, he told the police that the drawers in the apartment had all been pulled open and that about $6,000 in cash, a gold necklace, and a gold ring were missing. On the surface, it looked just like a home burglary and murder. But when police reviewed the building's security records, they realized something was wrong. The building was a private residence. Entry required an access card, and both the lobby and corridors were covered with CCTV cameras. Investigators carefully checked all entry logs and surveillance footage between 8 and 9:30 a.m. on the day of the incident. Yet they didn't see a single unfamiliar face. Not stopping there, police expanded their search to cover the 12 hours before the crime. Still, they found no trace of any suspicious person. In other words, no outsiders had entered the building at all. A case that, on the surface, looked like a burglary gone wrong, was now starting to look very unusual. Could it be that the killer wasn't an outsider after all? That afternoon, the coroner carried out the autopsy on Lau Siu-han. The report showed clear marks on her neck, signs of strangulation and bruising, along with what looked like fingernail scratches. The conclusion was clear: she had been strangled to death. But what truly shocked investigators was the time of death. The body was already completely stiff, and her internal temperature had dropped to around 30 degrees. Putting all the signs together, the coroner estimated she had died between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. This finding was completely different from the family's statements. Her son said he saw her sleeping at 6:30 a.m. Her husband even claimed he had spoken with her around 7:30. The autopsy shattered the timeline. Police began to suspect, had someone deliberately created a false picture to mislead the investigation? At first, police had no solid evidence pointing directly at Liang Wingxing. But on the night of October 2nd, the case suddenly took a dramatic turn. Lau Siu-han's 2 children voluntarily went to the police station and revealed what they had witnessed the night before the incident. According to the daughter, at around 10 p.m. on September 29th, her mother was sitting in the living room, complaining that her arm was hurting and that she wanted to take some medicine. At that moment, her father, Yang Wingxing, told her, "Yours are no good, take the ones I give you." He then took out several pills. When the mother saw them, she was surprised and asked, "Why do I have to take 4 pills?" Yang answered, "Yes, you need to take 4 for it to work." In the end, Lau Siu-han swallowed the pills. Not long after, she began to feel dizzy, even saying, "Wow, these pills are really strong. I feel so dizzy." About 15 minutes later, she couldn't stand it anymore and went back to her room to lie down. The next morning, their mother never woke up again. The autopsy report confirmed that Lau Siu-han's body contained traces of sleeping pills. But, according to her hospital prescription, she had only been given painkillers and stomach medicine. No sleeping pills at all. This meant the pills had been prepared in advance by Liang, and he had personally given them to his wife to swallow. The children's testimony became the single most crucial breakthrough of the entire case. What once looked like a burglary and murder suddenly transformed into a calculated homicide. From the very beginning, when police arrived at the scene, they already felt something wasn't right about Liang Wingxing. He had over 15 years of experience as a paramedic. Yet when he saw his wife lying unconscious, he didn't perform any immediate first aid. Instead, he chose to wait outside the apartment door until the police and other paramedics came. Even stranger, while speaking with police, he kept repeating that the house had been burgled, constantly trying to steer the investigation toward the idea of a home invasion robbery. All of these abnormal behaviors made investigators grow even more suspicious. To them, it seemed highly likely that Liang himself was the killer. As the investigation went deeper, police discovered another major red flag: insurance. It turned out that Liang had already taken out insurance policies years earlier. But in the months leading up to the incident, he suddenly added 2 new ones. with a combined coverage of about $1.2 million. What made it even more suspicious was that just one day before the murder, Leung had called his insurance agent to ask about the details of those policies. And right after doctors officially pronounced his wife dead, the very first thing he did was call the insurance company to report her death. When combined with the strange timeline, the 4 sleeping pills, and his odd behavior, a clear financial motive began to emerge. But what investigators didn't expect was that this case involved not only money, but also another woman. Lau Siu-han's younger sister went to her workplace to pack up her belongings. Among the papers, she discovered a love letter. The writer signed the letter as Ah Xing, and it was addressed to a woman named Tsai Ying. The contents of the letter were deeply emotional, almost melodramatic. It read, "My love for you has already surpassed that for my first love. Tsai Ying, I will love you forever." Lau's sister immediately recognized the handwriting. It belonged to her brother-in-law, Leung Wing-shing. In that moment, the truth hit hard. Leung had been carrying on a secret relationship behind the back of his wife of 18 years. Police quickly identified the woman in the letter. Her full name was Se Ying, a massage parlor worker in Shenzhen. Leung had met her while traveling across the border, and over time, their relationship had turned into a full-blown affair. From then on, the picture grew clearer. This wasn't just about money. For both financial gain and his mistress, Leung may have carefully plotted his wife's murder. Police continued digging and spoke to 2 very important people, Lau Siu-han's godsister and her Buddhist master. The godsister told investigators that Siu-han had long suspected her husband was cheating, but she was someone who valued her family above all else. She once said, "As long as he doesn't bring her into our home and doesn't tear this family apart, I can endure it." The Buddhist master provided even more evidence, 2 letters that Lau had personally written to him. The first letter, written a month before the murder, described how she discovered her husband writing love letters to another woman. She was devastated and could not believe that the man she had always trusted was betraying her. The second letter, written just 2 days before the incident, was very different. This time, she no longer mentioned the affair. Instead, she blamed herself, saying that her failed investments years earlier had burdened her family financially. She wrote that she was determined to continue her Buddhist practice, to bring happiness to her loved ones. These letters, together with the godsister's testimony, painted a heartbreaking picture. Lau knew about her husband's betrayal, but chose tolerance and forgiveness. Tragically, her kindness did not save her, and in the end, it cost her life. Then, in April 2004, 7 months after the crime, Lau Siu-han's sister and godsister had an unexpected encounter in Causeway Bay. There, outside Times Square, they saw Leung and Tsai Ying holding hands together in public. The moment they realized they had been seen, the 2 quickly let go. But Leung even muttered to them, "Do you know? I'm so bored with life too." The family immediately reported this to the police. When officers later visited Leung's apartment, he admitted that Tsai Ying was indeed inside his flat. By this stage, the police were convinced Leung's motive was not just money, but also his mistress. To have her, and to get the insurance payout, he had killed his own wife. In February 2006, the case finally went to trial in the High Court. Leung Wing-shing was charged with 1 count of murder. The prosecution argued that he killed his wife, Lau Siu-han, for 2 things: the Hong Kong $1.2 million insurance payout and his mistress, Tsai Ying. They laid out the evidence one by one, the 4 sleeping pills given by Lung, his failure to perform first aid despite being a paramedic, the suspiciously staged burglary scene, the life insurance policies he had just increased, and the emotional love letters he wrote to his mistress. But Lung and his defense lawyer came prepared. In court, Lung claimed he panicked when he saw his wife unconscious. He said he was so overwhelmed that he forgot his training as a paramedic and froze at the door, waiting for help. He admitted feeling guilty for not trying harder to save her. As for the insurance, he argued that he only bought the policies because sales staff had persuaded him and that the beneficiaries were his children, not himself. Regarding the sleeping pills, he claimed his wife sometimes asked for them on her own. The children, he said, must have misheard because the TV was on in the background when he was speaking. On the affair with Tsai Ying, Lung admitted they had a relationship, but said he only wanted to guide her onto the right path. The letter, full of flowery words, was, in his words, just writing, it didn't mean anything. He denied ever planning to leave his wife for her. The prosecution, however, told the jury that all these excuses were nothing more than lies, carefully crafted by a man trying to cover his crime. After hearing weeks of testimony, the case was finally handed over to the jury. 7 jurors, 4 men and 3 women, deliberated for 7 hours before returning with their decision. They unanimously found Lung Wingxing guilty of murdering his wife, Lao Siyuhan. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment. At that moment, Lung broke down completely in the courtroom. He cried uncontrollably, insisting over and over, "I didn't do it. I really didn't do it. Children, please believe me. Your father didn't do this." As he was led away, his 2 children rushed to see him one last time from across the dock. Through tears, he told them, "Be strong. Take care of yourselves. Think of me as already dead." It was a heartbreaking scene, a father crying out his innocence, while the evidence stacked against him had sealed his fate. The trial was over, but the tragedy it left behind was irreversible. A mother was gone, and the father was sentenced to life in prison. The family was completely destroyed. What stood out most in this case was the courage of Lao Siyuhan's 2 children.